I think many younger people hear Social Security is going to dry up.
If you're receiving Social Security, I can't ever think of any scenario where they would actually take away Social Security from you. 50% of your Social Security will become taxable. Well, it doesn't mean you pay 50%. As a general rule of thumb, we always say invest 10% of your income when you start working. But you think about Social Security and Medicare, and you're putting in 7.65%. Welcome back to another edition of Retire and Thrive, where we help you live your life with purpose, wealth, and confidence.
And the topic on Social Security continues this week. I'm Kamie, this is Dan, and we are hopefully going to help you navigate your retirement and know exactly what you should do with your Social Security and when you should possibly take it. How are you, Dan?
Everything's great, yeah.
Purple today, I like it.
You're a little bit purple, too.
Yeah, we're purple.
And we didn't even do the memo thing. Yeah.
We don't plan. We don't plan.
Yeah.
We just end up this way. So let's talk Social Security. My first question for you, Dan. I think many younger people hear Social Security is going to dry up. And maybe older people of all ages. What do you have to say about that? Is that true?
Well, I can't wave a magic wand and say it's going to be around for the next 150 years. But I look at our overall debt as a country that continues to escalate, and people are concerned. And we've actually had clients of ours that have actually made decisions specifically centered around that. I'm going to get it while it's still around.
Sure.
And so I think it's a very valid question, and I think it's very real. I think it is a myth. My opinion is that when I look at the government as a business, the Social Security, there's two factors here. What is the actual amount that they have sitting in their pool, if you will, to pay out? But I think the bigger controversy is the number of people contributing versus the number of people receiving.
Okay.
And so I think what a lot of people refer to there, Kamie, is my generation. I'm actually 1 year away from being considered a baby boomer. And so, but the baby boom generation, there's an estimated 70 million of them. And now the youngest baby boomer would be actually 60. So they're just a couple of years away from taking Social Security. So the whole concern was that you've got 70 million people that are just drawing down, and you don't have nearly enough people contributing to it. But one of the things in my 35 years in this business that I've witnessed is whether it's Social Security, whether it's tax changes, I've always seen the government, whenever they make these changes, they grandfather in everybody that's already in a program. Mm-hmm. So in other words, if you're receiving Social Security, I can't ever think of any scenario where they would actually take away Social Security from you.
Okay. For anyone just joining us this week, thank you so much for following along as we navigate your retirement, or if you're a younger person who's still in that accumulation phase, we are happy that you're here, and hopefully you'll learn a thing or two, because this is something that's very important in your future. Social Security, let's touch on it briefly. What is it? Why do we pay into Social Security?
Yep, we touched on it last week. Social Security, the first payments on a consistent monthly basis started in 1940 and signed by Roosevelt. And, back then, kind of an interesting fact that you maybe didn't know is back then in 1940, they took your paycheck and they withheld 2%.
Okay. And
that 2% funded the Social Security.
So that was when it began. Now what?
I was afraid you were going to ask that question. Today, the number is actually 6.2%.
Okay.
Now, there is something called inflation, Kamie,
Yeah.
so it has gone up. I'm not trying to defend the government here, but yeah, it's 6.2%. And
so that's what comes out of our paycheck.
6.2% comes out of your
So
paycheck.
If you do the math, you look at your paycheck, 6.2%.
6.2%. That's for the Social Security component. Mm-hmm. And the employer pays the other half.
Okay.
So you pay 6.2, the employer pays 6.2. So combined, let me do the math here. Yep, 12.4.
12.4%. Okay. And it started at 2%.
Started at 2%.
Without an employer match.
Right. That is correct.
So how much are we paying into Social Security?
Great question. And we often see the dollar amount on our paycheck, but we don't always know what that translates into.
Is it the same for everyone?
Absolutely not. It's a percentage of your income. So if you make $50,000, but the same percentage for everybody, correct?
Sure.
And that percentage is 6.2%.
Okay, 6.2%, all from the employee.
No, actually, the employer matches that. So if you're putting in 6.2, the employer also matches or pays in. I shouldn't say matches. You put in 6.2, the employer puts in 6.2. So combined, it's 12.4% between you and your employer that's going in for Social Security.
And you touched on inflation. So has that changed over the years? If I've been working for 20 years, have I always paid 6.2%?
Yep, going back to the 1940 when they first started Social Security monthly payments, the actual dollar amount was 2%, or the actual percentage was 2%.
2%. And that was only from no employer match there or whatever.
Right. So
Okay.
we've gone from 2% to 6.2%. And as long as we're on this subject, I'll just touch on this, even though it's not relevant to the topic here. But you may also notice in your paycheck another line item that says
Yes.
Medicare.
Okay, what's the percent
And that's
on that?
1.45%.
And for folks that don't know, typically your younger population has no idea what Medicare is. Why am I paying into this? Why are we paying into it?
Yeah, Medicare on a very general level is health insurance that is provided to all people in the United States 65 and older.
Okay.
And again, we can dive into that. In fact, someone had commented the other day about, Medicare gets really confusing and what's
Yeah.
this IRMA and surtax and all. I think we will save that. I didn't really touch on that in the book, but I think
Sure.
it's relevant enough because we just had someone the other day that commented and said, I'd really like to know more about Medicare.
Okay.
But to bring it back to what we're talking about here, 6.2% for Social Security, 1.45% for Medicare. So combined, you'll pay 7.65% between Social Security and Medicare.
Okay, between the two. That's good to know for younger folks and for those in retirement, how much have I paid in? So I'm paying that percent in. Am I getting that money back eventually when I turn, say, 62 or 67?
Yes, that's part of the monthly payments that you will get. So there is a cap, by the way. So once you cross over, and that cap has continued to change over the years. So for people that have higher income, right now for this year, it's around $176,000. So in other words, once you hit $176,000, you are now done paying into Social Security.
Oh.
And why is that relevant? Well, if you're making $50,000 a year, you're still paying the same 6.2%, but if you're making $176,000, you're still paying 6.2%. But once you hit that $176,000 as of this year, you will no longer continue to contribute to the Social Security. So that when you retire, it takes a look at all of the dollars that you've contributed to Social Security, and it looks at it over a 40-year window, and then that determines what the amount of your Social Security will be at those different ages, like we talked about last week.
Okay, so I'm not going to do the math, but if you're making a ton of money early on and you reach that cap sooner, then you're just done paying Social Security?
Yeah. In the calendar year, let me see if I understand the question. If you make a ton of money and you earn $176,000 and it's August, then you will not pay any more for the rest of the year.
Caps in the year.
It's capped in a calendar year. Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks
Gotcha.
for clarifying.
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Let's
Let's talk about Social Security. When you reach that retirement age, when should I take Social Security? How does it work? What are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen when it comes to Social Security?
I've seen a lot of them. I had mentioned one last time about taking Social Security prior to that full retirement age. And again, for those of you that didn't see last episode, all of us based on our date of birth or our age, full Social Security, the maximum right now is 67. But for people that are a little bit older, it could be 66 and a half or 66 in 9 months. But that's one big mistake, is taking Social Security before your full retirement and then having an income up and above the threshold, which is around $21,000, and then your Social Security's taxed. So that's a big one, and we've seen that. And as I mentioned last time, again, for the viewers that weren't watching it last week, after 12 months you sign up for Social Security, that decision is irrevocable. You can't change it.
Okay. And we touched on it last week as well, the spousal benefit. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? How does it work, and why is it something that you should take into consideration?
Yeah, so there's two things that we're really talking about, spousal benefit and survivor benefit. They're two totally separate things.
Okay.
I think last week we talked, if I remember, we were talking about the survivor benefit, and I know you got a little anxious about that, and you were like,
I'm just saying, I'm putting money in. Where is that money going if someone, heaven forbid, does pass away?
yeah, and that's an unfortunate thing. So if you were never married and you start taking Social Security at 62 or 65 and you pass away 3 years later, it is gone. You cannot list beneficiaries, family members or kids or anything like that, other than, and I mentioned it too, minor children are entitled to survivor benefits. But for people that are not minors, the only benefit is two spouses.
Okay. Two spouses. And how does that work if someone were to pass away? Because you're not getting two Social Security benefits.
Correct.
You're getting one.
Yeah, and the way that works, and again, that goes back to some of the strategy of when to take it, and a lot of that is based on earnings. And oftentimes when we do the analysis, Kamie, we find that the higher income earner of the two, typically they're going to be better off waiting and taking it later because you get that compound effect. Remember, from 62 to your full retirement grows about 7% a year, and from full retirement to 70 it grows by 8% a year. So if my income is $100,000 and my spouse is $60,000, and we both contributed and our income proportionally has been about the same, I may be better off waiting. And so back to your question with the survivor benefit is if my spouse is getting $2,100 a month from Social Security and I'm getting $3,000 a month, if I predecease her, she can choose to keep her own or she can take mine, but not both. So obviously in that scenario, she's going to take my Social Security, but she will lose hers. So she would get the $3,000 a month, but then she would lose her $2,100 a month.
Sure. Taxes always something that maybe intimidates folks. Maybe not always, but for many, there's always tax implications here and there. How does that work with Social Security? Am I getting taxed on this money if I'm 62 or say I'm 67 and I'm getting my payment? Yeah. When is that taxed?
Great question. And that's actually a really, really relevant question because a lot of people aren't aware of this. State of Minnesota is a little bit different than most, so I don't really want to go down the state of Minnesota because I know we've got viewers all over the country. So I'm going to talk just more about the federal level or at the federal level. Minnesota does tax Social Security if you have a certain level of income, so it's taxed at the state level. But at the federal level, again, it depends on if you're filing an individual return or if you're filing a joint tax return. But again, without going into the specific numbers, you can research it, and it's very public data. But the first threshold, 50% of your Social Security will become taxable.
Okay.
Now, let me clarify that because people sometimes get really worked up. I said 50% is taxable. It doesn't mean you pay 50%.
Yes.
So
because when I first heard that, I thought that was like, okay, 50%
I'm going to lose half
of your money.
No. You're not going to pay half of it in tax. But if you've got an income, again, let's just say Social Security is $2,000 a month, and let's say that you've got other sources of income that pushes you into the point where 50% of your Social Security is taxable, if you're getting that $2,000 per month, $24,000 a year, you would report $12,000, and that would be reported as regular income in and amongst the other income.
Taxes often can be intimidating, and we would look at Social Security. I guess my question is, what part of our Social Security is taxed, and when is it taxed?
Yeah, so that's something that is often easily misunderstood. And so we've been paying into this thing all those years, as we've talked about. And
is that pre-tax when it goes in out of my paycheck?
Yeah, so you aren't paying tax on that, correct?
Right.
But when you go to pull it out, oftentimes we think it's tax-free, but it depends on your income at that time. And I won't go into all of the numbers because it depends on whether you're married, whether you're single. But at the end of the day, I'm going to speak just at the federal level. Minnesota has their own circumstances based on incomes that I won't go into because, again, we've got viewers from all over the country.
Sure.
But at the federal level, if you're filing a income tax return and your income is at too high of a level, maybe you've got a pension that's coming in, maybe you've got some other assets, maybe you're drawing from your portfolio. But if your income's over a certain threshold, whether you file individual or joint, up to 50% of it is the first tranche of your Social Security is taxable.
Okay.
Now, let me clarify. 50% is taxable. That doesn't mean you pay half of your Social Security in. So if you've got $2,000 a month coming in Social Security and you've got other sources of income, that's instead of, $24,000, all of which, is tax-free, you would report $12,000 as income.
When you're looking at that lump sum of money that you're taking from to get those payments once you're in retirement, how do you determine how much you're getting? How long are they rationing it out for? Because, I mean, you don't know how long you're going to continue living.
You're talking about
when you get the payments for your Social Security. So say I'm getting into retirement. I'm looking to, I'm going to start taking my Social Security. Say I'm 67. How do you know how much money you're going to get? How is it determined?
Yeah, so there is typically a cost of living adjustment in Social Security that varies. So when we build out our plans for people, we generally build out about a 3% increase in Social Security, and that's tied to the Consumer Price Index. So there were years, not too long ago, when we had rapid inflation that there were 6, 7, 8% increases in the Social Security or the COLA, cost of living adjustment. And as we talked about, Kamie, I'm not sure if I'm addressing your question or not, but a lot of that's based on how long you live.
Sure.
And so if you're getting $2,000 a month and it goes up on average by 3% per year and you live to be 85, we can do the math and see what your total income that you have received over Social Security. But I want to go back to the taxability of this for just a minute because that does tie into some of this strategy. And the strategy is that if half of your Social Security is taxable and you're in a 30% tax bracket, let's just say, or even a 26% or 24%, you're losing a fourth of your Social Security. So think of it, if I'm getting $2,000 a month and I pay 25% tax on that, or I have to claim half of that. So in this example, it's $1,000 a month that you're having to claim, and you're in the 25% tax bracket or 24% tax bracket, you in essence are losing $250 out of that $2,000 every time that you get there. And the other thing I want to just tell the viewers is that it doesn't stop at 50%. It actually, the maximum Social Security, I see that smile. I know what that smile means.
Lovely.
The maximum Social Security taxability is 85%.
Okay. All depends on your income.
Your income.
So I guess my question was, do you determine how much money you're getting?
That's an awesome question. And the answer is, you determine the amount that you're going to get based on when you elect to take it, like we talked about, 62, 67, 70, but it's based on how much you have contributed to the Social Security over those last 40 years of your working career.
Okay.
And so if you are, we touched earlier that the maximum amount is based on the maximum wage is $176,000, then you're done paying into Social Security. So if you've maxed it out for the past, 20, 30 years, you're going to have a very high Social Security. Again, depends on when you take it. It's going to increase as the more years that you delay it. But yes, you do have a say in how much you're going to get in Social Security based on when you take it, but you don't have a say of how much you're going to get because it's based on your contributions to the Social Security fund. Does that answer?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
You touched on, we're in Minnesota, folks watching all over. Different states have different tax implications when it comes to Social Security. Maybe there's folks that are moving, or maybe you're going to buy a house in Arizona and move to Arizona or something like that. I mean, folks will take that into consideration. We can look that all up.
Yeah, absolutely. And Minnesota's a little bit of an outlier. Most states do not tax Social Security, but Minnesota does. Again,
on top of that federal tax.
Yeah, on top of that, based on certain income limits.
Has that always been the case in Minnesota? Do you know?
I don't know the answer if it's always been the case.
Interesting.
There's been a lot of legislative changes in the years, so I don't know the answer. If it's always been the case, I do know now it is.
Okay. Anything more that you'd like folks to know? I guess, what is your one tip for people? Say they're heading into retirement, they're looking at that Social Security. What is your one tip to folks who are reaching that retirement age and looking at their Social Security? I'm sure you have many tips.
There are, and I was just trying to think if I knew nothing about Social Security, where would I start?
Yeah.
And I think the first place I would start is to go online. They usually send these things out, and I think I don't remember the exact age, but I think maybe at age 60 they start sending them back out every year on your birthday. But you can go online to Social Security Administration, and you can look at your earnings. I mean, I've done it myself. You literally log in.
Yeah, I've done it.
It takes less
Easy.
than a few minutes to log in, and it'll show you your earning history and projected amount at full retirement. And I would just encourage, if anybody that's approaching retirement, I don't care if you're 55 or if you're 62 or whatever the age is, Get that report, study it, look at it, and then once you have it, do an analysis. Again, I'm a little bit biased because we have software that does all the analysis, but if you don't want to go somewhere and have them do the Social Security analysis for you, just take a hard look at your numbers. Look at, if you're married, your spouse's numbers, and then maybe factor in what it's going to take to live, and obviously some of the other considerations. We're talking about health, we're talking about longevity, and truly weigh in the fact that my spouse is going to get so much at this age, I'm going to get so much at this age, and take an hour and just do different scenarios and figure out what might be the best scenarios. And again, this is not a hard and fast rule, and I say this often, but generally speaking, the health aside, assuming both spouses are healthy, generally the one that has the higher income or has contributed the most to Social Security, which in turn will get the most in Social Security, should delay it longer than the other one.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thanks so much for joining us. Dan, can you touch on what we will be chatting about next week?
We're going to wrap up. This is lesson 5 from the book. We're going to wrap up on Social Security. We're going to just touch on a couple more things with Social Security. And again, I know it gets a little bit heavy, and somebody at your age maybe look at this and say it's kind of boring. And
it's interesting. It is.
But what's interesting for me is, when I look at the younger generation and how much they actually are contributing, it does add up. I mean, think about this for a minute. I mean, one of the things I've told my kids is when they get into their working years, which they're now all are, they're in their mid-20s and late 20s, and then one's 30, is, as a general rule of thumb, we always say invest 10% of your income when you start working. And if you put away 10%, whatever the company matches, you should have a comfortable retirement, which is very, very general statement. But you think about Social Security and Medicare, and you're putting in 7.65%. And I think about the younger generation like you, and you kind of scratch your head, and you're like, geez, I'm paying 6.2% into Social Security, 1.45% into Medicare. Combine them over 7.5%. That's close to the 10%. And, unfortunately, you can't change that. That's just automatically pulled from your paycheck. So.
Yeah, but hopefully will benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's important too. If you have younger people at home, go through the paycheck with them. Maybe it's their first job or something.
Right.
Let them know, hey, this is, because I work with a lot of younger people. They're just getting into the industry, and they don't, what am I paying this for? What is this going to? So it is important to take a look at that paycheck and see where it's going. And then when you reach that retirement age, hopefully you can reap the benefits.
Absolutely.
All right, Dan, thank you so much. Thanks to you for joining us and following along as we talk about Social Security. We will wrap up, as Dan mentioned, a few final points when it comes to your Social Security and taking it once you reach that retirement age. We hope that you'll join us next week. Again, thank you for following along. You can watch this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate it. We hope you have a great week.